Hello everyone, it's Paul Tilley again, and welcome to HN1100 Labor Relations. Today, I wanted to look at Chapter 10, which is the next unit. And the next unit is really dealing with the issue of we've created our union, we're up and running there, we are gone into negotiations, we have met back and forth, and we just haven't been able to reach an agreement. And that happens a lot. So what can we do as a union, or what can we do as a company in order to move these negotiations forward? What are some of the things that we can do? And further to that, what must we do? Because provincial legislation or federal legislation commands that we don't go on strike right away. We need to be able to seek someone's help before we move into a strike situation in the place on which we're negotiating. So, third-party intervention is most common whenever we need to be able to enhance our ability to reach an agreement. So, this chapter looks at the various tools that are used or at the disposal created by unions and labor relations boards and companies over the last number of years. There are three basic types of dispute resolution systems that we need to look at. The first one is something called conciliation. Conciliation is an initial mandatory stage before anyone goes on strike. Next, we have mediation. Mediation is a derivative of conciliation, but it is more involved and more engaging, and as a result, it is more likely to result in a resolution. However, mediation doesn't occur until after conciliation has taken place. Finally, we have something called arbitration. And arbitration is a tool that is used by companies and unions when they cannot seem to reach an agreement, and it is used as an alternative to going on strike. So, without further ado, let's look at these in great detail. First, conciliation. Okay, so picture it. You have been negotiating with your partner organization for several weeks. Negotiations have gone well at the start. They haven't gone well so far in the last little while. And as a result, you're saying to yourself, this doesn't look good. We might have to go on strike in order to get what we want. So it is at this desperate time when we feel that we have done all we can in order to move the negotiations further, we being the company and the union, is at that point when we often seek some help. We either do it voluntarily, and that is we go to the Provincial Department of Labor and we say to them, or the Federal Department of Labor, and we say to them, we're stuck, our negotiations are not solving the problem, we need some help in moving this along. So the provincial or the federal government, whichever jurisdiction we're operating in, will appoint a conciliator. And a conciliator is a provincial or federal government employee, depending on the jurisdiction that you operate in. That person is tasked with the job of coming and meeting with the parties and seeing if he or she can help bring some sort of a break to the deadlock. So what we're trying to do is break that deadlock. So all Canadian jurisdictions have this in place, and it is essential that it occur before any strike occurs. The conciliator will stay with the process as long as he or she feels that progress is being made. Once they feel that, no, they're not making any progress with this, the conciliator simply writes a report and submits the report to the Minister of Labor. Once the Minister of Labor gets it in his or her hands, the union can strike the company, or the company can lock out the workers 15 days after. So it sets a clock in motion. It sets a clock in motion towards a strike. Conciliation, a lot of research has been done into its usefulness, and conciliation does have some degree of use, but it hasn't been all that useful to most situations where an impasse exists, and it hasn't been really good at breaking that impasse. So what companies and unions can do is, if they find that the conciliator has not done what they want in order to help resolve the situation, they can go to another step before they go on strike, or even after they go on strike. We're looking to find a resolution. We could be in a strike situation, we could be out on strike, we could be thinking about going on strike, but the fact of the matter is the conciliator has been in, tried to solve the problem, and it didn't work. What we could do then is move on to something called mediation. And mediation is when both parties, union and management, agree to bring on an independent person who is agreeable to both sides. The job of that independent person will be to actively sit down. The conciliator tends to be a more passive role. The mediator tends to be more active. The conciliator is just there to kind of superficially help get the parties together. The mediator is actively there, doing many of the same things. The mediator will meet with both sides, attempt to find common ground, sit down with both sides at the same time sometimes even. But the mediator has a certain degree of more power, because everybody realizes that, we're in desperate times and we could go on strike if this doesn't work out, or we've been out on a strike for a while and we want to get a resolution. So mediators tend to be more effective. They're not mandatory. There's no one that says that you have to have a mediator. Unlike a conciliator, you do need a conciliator, but a mediator is an optional thing. The third type of intervention is called arbitration. Now, conciliation and mediation is strictly an advisory role. The conciliator will write a report and advise. The mediator will advise. An arbitrator, on the other hand, will command. And not too many unions and not too many employers will want to go down the road of selecting an arbitrator. What an arbitrator does is an arbitrator comes in, listens to both sides, and writes a report. That report is binding. The findings of that report are binding on both sides. So essentially, the arbitrator solves the dispute by listening to both sides, writing a report, and effectively writing a new collective agreement that is then imposed on both parties. Now you think about it. How many people would agree to giving their future in the hands of a third party and letting them decide how to solve the problems that we have? Not a lot. It's, from an employer's perspective, it's like giving a third party a checkbook and saying, go write a check. From the union's perspective, it's risky, because the union could say, we want a bunch of things, but the arbitrator said, no, we're not getting them, and we didn't get them. So arbitration is really a last-ditch thing, or arbitration can be brought in where unions are not allowed or have limited ability to go on strike. But arbitration tends to be very reluctantly met with by unions and by management. So that is the key part of that chapter. As I say, the arbitration situation is not something that too many unions and too many employers like going down the road to. Mediation tends to be a very useful tool in the sense that the mediator gets right into the meat of the problem and works with both parties to resolve it. Conciliation tends to be a more of a superficial approach to solve the problem, where someone comes in and says to the parties, hey boys, let's talk. You need to be aware of these basic types. If you have any questions, you let me know. Thank you.